This edition of MacVoices is brought to you by Take Control Books, the answers you need now from leading experts. Learn more and download yours at takecontrolbooks.com. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, we continue down the road to Macworld. This time the road to Macworld takes us to Melbourne, Australia to talk to Les Posen of Presentation Magic, the chief magician of Presentation Magic. Les, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Chuck. Nice to be with you.
Chief magician, Les?
Well, it came up with Presentation Magic because when I first came to Macworld 2008, Paul Kent and I were looking for names for what we were going to call my little 1 hour presentation. I was an unknown quantity. And he came up with the Zen of presentation. My friend Gar Reynolds, who has a book called Presentation Zen, I thought would have been a little bit upset by that. And I said, no, let's find something else. He said, well, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to show how magical Keynote is. And boom, there it was. So it became Presentation Magic. And of course, I'm the chief magician. And the idea, however, is more serious than that because it's about the transformation of presentations from the ordinary into something that's quite special. And if you think about how often Apple itself or Apple executives describe the things that Apple does, how often the word magic comes into their descriptions. Johnny Ive, it's just magic. When this thing happens, it's just magic. Steve Jobs, when he introduced the iPad, it's magic. So they're very aware of this term. It's not going to be a magic act. It's the sense of being convinced that something quite extraordinary is happening. And that's kind of what I try and do in my presentations.
Les, there's so many things I want to talk to you about and ask you about. I want to make sure that we get right off the bat, talk about the presentation and the title. And the title, and I'm reading these to make sure I get them right, is Exploring the Power of Keynote 6, Bringing Presentations into the 21st Century. There's so many people I would love to drag to your session because right now it's sort of a sport for me to go to business presentations and spot the worst presentation. The mistakes in the presentations that people make, the presentations that look like they came from 1979, it's amazing. So if you can, I'm not even sure if you could just get them into like the 20th century, it would be good, but the 21st would be much appreciated.
I'll tell a little funny story because it shows you where I'm coming from. In 2003, I'd already been a practicing clinical psychologist for 20 years, and I decided I was intrigued by a new course that had started up at the University of Melbourne here, called Knowledge Management. It was a postgrad diploma in knowledge management leading to a master's and PhD, and it was three faculties combined: information and computer science, education, and business and commerce, all combining for this one degree called knowledge management in 2003. Well, 2003 is an interesting year because it was the year in which Keynote was also released out onto the market, 2003. And so I go back to university, not having been to university since the early 1980s when I finished my formal training. And so I hadn't really been exposed to how universities taught. I'd seen overhead transparencies and blackboards and whiteboards. I had not been exposed to day in, day out PowerPoint. And when I went back to this degree, I had weekends of bullet points coming out my ears. And I thought, there's an irony here. Here we are, knowledge management. It's about knowledge transfer. It's about what's in your head getting into my head. It's knowledge transfer. And yet the means by which they were doing that was through PowerPoint. And the irony was not lost on me because it's the worst knowledge transfer tool you can get. And so when in 2003, when it came time for me to do my first seminar, I said, I'll bite the bullet, pardon the expression, and I'll use Keynote. Well, the reception I got from Keynote, and these were people who are CEOs and top doctors and lawyers doing the same course with me, flabbergasted me how they responded to my use of Keynote, which is not nearly as close as what I do nowadays with it. And it blew me away. So this double irony of people really responding at this emotional level to how I use Keynote in a course about knowledge transfer started me on this course of saying, I've got to help scientists and academics and business people use what we call in my trade affective neuroscience. How does the brain work, especially with emotions, to convey complex information to audiences who are very bright perhaps, but they don't have a very specific knowledge. And so you need to develop skills by which you can convey complex ideas to people who are perhaps senior decision makers. Nobody better example than, say, climate change, where the scientists at the pointy end of the research tend to be lousy presenters, and their message is lost in complex graphs and charts and terminology, and they seriously training in how to get complex messages to intelligent audiences. And you're right. I go and I cringe. I've now got to the point where it's very hard for me to see the content of the message because I'm processing how they're delivering the message, and the content on me is lost. And so it's a struggle for me. This is the bane of my existence.
I'm right there with you. And so many of these people have never taken a course, never picked up a book. And by the way, Presentation Zen by Gar Reynolds, great book. I know Gar real well, and it is a fabulous book. It'll teach you how not to do what Les and I are both talking about. But it just amazes me. They think that, okay, I've learned how to place the stock clip art, and I found the transition button. Oh boy, and they're presenters, and boy, if anything now, I guess there was a time that would qualify you, but not anymore. Now you just look kind of silly.
No, things have changed too much, and one of the things I hope to do at the workshop is show people the sort of things that young people especially are coming through in their youth and in their early introduction to college, the sort of expectations they have of how media is used in their training, even for what might be fairly dull, appearing to be dull courses, information-rich dull courses, can be spruced up if you understand where they're coming from. This is the YouTube generation that makes its own stuff. They know how to use iMovie. I had a 14-year-old patient in my room last week who needed to fly to China very soon on a school excursion. His father's a 50-year-old, 55-year-old CEO. Came in with him, and I said, look, excuse me, where you're sitting on my couch, I've got my green screen set up with my green screen and my poles and whatever else. I said, I'll move that away so you can sit down. And I looked at the 14-year-old and said, do you know what a green screen is? He goes, yeah, we use it in school all the time. And I looked at the father and I said, do you know what a green screen is? He said, I've got no idea. And I got the 14-year-old to explain to his father this is the generation that's coming through. You go and put them at 19 into college with deadly dull, 6 bullet points, 6 words per line into a college course for hours and hours. They're just going to flip out their smartphone or play on their MacBook, and they're drifting off somewhere else. You've lost them. So the presentation magic is the art, I think, of engagement. Even with dull material, what would appear on the surface to be dull, you can make lively and engaging. It's how you tell your story. And the bottom line is this, for academics listening, here's what's really interesting. The perils of publishing are with us. You've got to publish. You've got to be out there in the scientific journals. And, of course, they're only going to now publish evidence-based material. Here's your evidence, shows how this works. And yet, the basis on which those same scientists go and present their material at conferences is not based at all on any evidence of what works best for knowledge transfer. It's based on tradition and conformity. My professor did this, his professor did that, her professor, and that's how we're going to continue down the line. This is the irony of it all. And I like busting up ironies.
And it's interesting. You're taking it from the academic standpoint. I live with it from the business standpoint, where the presentations are not – they're designed to impart information, but also often in a sales kind of format. And it's the same thing. It's just, if anything, it's counterproductive. It'd be better to turn it off and talk to someone instead of trying to put all this stuff up in front of them. Because it's always about what the presenter thinks is important, never what the audience feels is important or needs to know.
What's happened is that slideshows have become the little 3x5 cards that people used to use like this and look down. And PowerPoint, the way people use it, has become that, except we all get to see your 3x5 cards. And usually we get to see it before you get to see it. So we've already read the whole thing before you even get a chance to get to the second line. And where's the next? So one of the things I often will say is, don't even, if academics especially, is never give out your slides ahead of time. I know your students want them, they want to download it ahead so they know exactly what's coming. But how can you possibly keep them engaged if they're already on page 15 of a 20-page slide set and you're still on page 2? They've already said, yeah, I know. That's not how you keep people engaged. So there are lots of little tricks about keeping audiences engaged, which come from my field of psychology and storytelling, which is what we're going to use during this workshop that we'll be doing at Macworld.
So with all that, I guess now we've kind of identified what we both find annoying about the state of presentations. Let's talk a little bit about you and what you're going to bring to this session. Presentation Magic, as far as I'm concerned, is one of those must-read blogs if you do presentations or if you're interested in ways to convey messages. And I'm hoping you can bring all of that magic to this session, pack it down in an hour, and teach us all we need to know. What do you think?
Well, let's just remind people that we have 2 presentations coming up at Macworld. There's a 4-day workshop on the Wednesday preceding the formal start. That's between 10 and 5 in Moscone. And I think I may even be able to help you out a little bit here and pull it up. How's that?
Okay.
Am I up there?
Yep. So, something is up. Part of it anyway.
There we go. Yeah, so I'll take myself out of it. How's that? So that's.
And by the way, folks, this is Les doing presentation magic. He's just disappeared.
Yeah. So this is you can still hear me though. So this is the one, the all day presentation between 10 o'clock and in the morning at 5 o'clock. Now, this is not a lab. I need to explain. This is not a lab. It's me walking you through the general principles of presentation magic and deconstructing lousy presentations and deconstructing great presentations. So we'll be looking at other people's presentations and taking the audience through the general principles of what makes for a great presentation. I'm firmly of the belief that you don't want me to tell you. You want to go on a journey of self-discovery, which I direct you to gently. You want to come up to your own conclusions why this doesn't work and that does work. So it's not quite before and after stuff. Because everyone says, yeah, I know what's lousy about PowerPoint, but no one bothers to change it. So I need to show people how to change it. To some extent, that means we'll go into the guts of Keynote, into the mechanics of it. But this is not an IT workshop, mechanical workshop where everyone's sitting in front of their computers and saying, now try this, now try that. It's not that. I will deconstruct my own Keynotes and show people not just how I did it, but why did I do this? What's the effect I'm trying to achieve? And say, let's try this. What do you think? Is it better or worse? And then play with it. So my feeling is that the best way to get to know Keynote, especially Keynote 6 now, because of the changes, to get your hands dirty with it and play with it and just see what differences it makes, and then have someone like me explain to you why this works and why this is not as good as what it could be. On the 1 hour one, which is the one that I think you were referring to, I'll be taking an hour's quick journey through some of the presentations I've been doing of myself or created for others in recent times. And again, doing the same, quickly walking people through and showing people the power of presenting and how we can change and influence. And hopefully steer people away from the standard 6 bullet points and 6 words per bullet point. So that's the one at 1 o'clock. Now, am I up against you on the Saturday?
What time are you on Saturday? I'm not sure.
1 o'clock?
No, I don't think so.
Now you can come.
Okay, good. Otherwise, I'm just going to have to bring my session over to you and say, here, watch Les.
Yeah, that's right. So let me go back here. So I'm trying to also show people how things like presentations can be used in different domains. So we've been talking about business and we've been talking about academia. But I now give lectures and special interest presentations on ships that go cruising. And people are there. They're 7 days captured on board. You can't get off except every second day. So in those days at sea, I give presentations about how the brain works, about optical illusions, about new gadgets and technology, a whole variety of things. And I use Keynote to do that. And I get CEOs who are semi-retired coming onto those cruises, and they say to me, how did you do that? Because I've never seen people present like this before. Now, those cruise liners are stipulating you must have graphic-rich environments in terms of presenting your material. So even they are grabbing on. You've got a captive audience. I can't get off. So they really want you to up your standards of presentations to match these, the money that people are paying. And we're going to see this across the board. MOOCs, for instance, those massive online communities. You can't, where you can enroll and you do this at your own pace. You can't use the standard presentation styles that people have been using. So we're going to see a massive change in how presentations have been developing because the way that people are being educated is now changing. And if you're still presenting 1997 style, you're going to be left in the dust. So this is a chance for those in government, in academia, business to come along and just see for themselves and ask questions. I always encourage lots of questions about what is the empirical evidence, what is the science behind presenting as much as we know nowadays.
This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by Take Control Books, the answers you need now from leading experts. Joe Kissel helps you examine and secure your confidential information in his book, Take Control of Your Online Privacy. You may not be of interest to the intelligence agencies, but how about marketing firms who want to sell you their products, whether you're interested in them or not? And there are always the bad guys out there who are interested in everyone. Online privacy goes way beyond just improving your passwords. Joe shows you how to manage your internet connection, protect yourself while web surfing, secure your email, share files securely, and more. Security expert Rich Mogul, the CEO of Securosis, says that Take Control of Your Online Privacy is the first comprehensive and practical guide to protecting your privacy in the digital age. Joe helps you make and implement the right privacy choices for your life. Joe will be touching on this subject by participating in Josh Center's NSA panel at Macworld iWorld 2014, and you can hear an extended discussion with him about the book on MacVoices number 13176. Don't just sit there, protect yourself. Take control of your online privacy at takecontrolbooks.com and start protecting your online privacy today. Take Control Books, the answers you need now from leading experts. Thanks to Take Control Books for their support of MacVoices. Les, this seems so obvious to me, and I think you'll agree. This is a great way for someone to distinguish themselves, whether you're in business or academia, because it's overlooked. The younger generation has media classes in elementary school. You're right. Yes. We didn't have that, and so we don't think of it in those terms. And people in our general age group, and I think that this is a fantastic tool to make yourself stand out from the crowd by doing something different instead of, like you said, the 6-bullet point PowerPoint.
Yes, the bar isn't particularly high to stand out. I have to tell you, in most of the conferences that I go to. I'm finishing off a blog entry now that stemmed from my attending an American Psychological Association conference in Hawaii. I've still got my Hawaiian shirt on, back in August. And I don't know if you know this, but the American Psychological Association sets the standards for scientific publications, how to reference, that sort of stuff. And it actually publishes a publications manual, how to write scientific papers for publication, not just in psychology, but right across the board. And it's become known as the APA standard. And yet, in the presentations that I saw, 1968 came and it wants its presentations back. That's how bad it was.
Yeah.
So, and I took screenshots. I had my little iPhone. I was taking shots while I was throwing up in my mouth. Not just did we have, what people did is they took their scientific paper and literally just screenshot and threw it up on the screen. Not even break it down into 6 bullets, but put it up. Hold on, Chuck. I haven't finished yet. They put that up. It's like, you know what they did next? Come on, you know what they did next. Come on, you know what they did next.
I'm afraid to ask.
No, ask. I can handle it. I'm a psychologist. I can handle it. What do you think they did next? What's the next worst thing to do in a presentation, apart from thousands of words on a slide? What did they do?
They read the presentation.
Yes. Yes. Do you feel ill now? So here we are with thousands of words across slides, and they stood there and they read the slide. And I looked around the room while I'm throwing up in my mouth, and everyone's sitting going, I'm thinking, my God, you all accept this as the norm. What's wrong with you people? You're psychologists. And so here's the American Psychological Association setting the scientific standard for publication, but not a word said about how to present at its own conferences. And I'm just sitting there, and I've presented it at APA, mind you, and I've got feedback. People saying, what a breath of fresh air. I can see you really put some effort into this, because I didn't just simply take a scientific paper and dumped it on half a dozen PowerPoint slides. And that's what people do. They just dump it. And then they denude it of verbs.
Yeah. And Les, okay, so those are the worst things. What's the third worst thing? What's the thing that you hate to hear in a presentation? Because I know what it is for me.
Well, I actually have a list of 6 annoyances, which I borrowed from someone's PowerPoint annoyance list. And one of them is that they put the font too small so that people sitting at the back of the room can't read it. Essentially, what people have done is they've forgotten that they're presenting to human beings in an audience. They haven't scoped out the room they're going to be in. They're not facile enough with the software to understand when they go to the workshop, to the room they're going to be in the day before, and say, oh my God, my slides are going to look really bad here. They don't know how to go back and adjust that. I mean, in the old days, academics, for instance, had graphics departments in universities who made 35mm slides in your carousel, and that's what you'd bring to the workshop. Now you're expected to know everything. Graphics departments have gone. You're supposed to know how to do it yourself. And that's why it's dumbed down, because the scientists and academics are saying, I haven't got time for this. It's not an important thing of my research and my practice to do presentations. I have to do it because I have to do it. So they don't see presentations as an implicit part of being a scientist. And I think you can't do that anymore. Things are changing too much. If you want to get grant money, whatever else, you have got to be a good presenter nowadays. So what was your next major annoyance?
Oh, my thing is sitting here, the screens behind me are off to the side, and the person will look around and say, you probably can't read that, but
because the font's too small.
Because the font's too small, or there's too many words on there, and you just want to say, okay, so why would you, if they can't read it, if you put it together so they couldn't read it, what kind of idiot are you? It's just amazing.
The person who's become self-centric and not audience-centric. So one of the things I try and get across is become audience-centric. Be aware of your audience's strengths and potential weaknesses. The potential weaknesses are that they're human beings, and if you split their attention, you say one thing but show something else, guess which one they're going to go for? Vision will trump audio. You're going to be looking at the slide while you're talking about something that's irrelevant to the slide. So one of the techniques I show is how to make things contiguous, how to bring together the audio and the video together, and that is a skill. It's a presentation skill which supersedes or goes way past being able to put a slide together. So when people come to the workshop, they're going to get much more than just what happens onto that file menu in Keynote. It's much more than that. It really is the whole thing about how to use your presentation skills and why Keynote is your better choice amongst all the things, because of its simplicity, but also because it engages, because of its cinematic style. You just have to put up a PowerPoint and Keynote together on the one platform and do a really slow 20-second dissolve and just see the difference between the two platforms. Because PowerPoint is going to go and pixelate like crazy, and Keynote will stick to the values that Steve Jobs initially introduced in 2003. He says Keynote has to have cinematic properties, because he was so heavily involved with Pixar and Disney. He understood the power of film, and he wanted those same qualities to come into Keynote. And so you had these beautiful slow dissolves. People, I want a cube. Well, get rid of the cube. It's just, you see it once hard, nice. But the slow dissolve and other forms of transition is really what gets to people. It's a wonderful overlooked part of Keynote. So we'll be looking at some of these things in Keynote, but it's not just how to do it, it's why to do it.
So, Les, you gave me a perfect segue there, because I do want to just get into a little bit of nuts and bolts, not a lot. But the hour-long session is specifically exploring the power of Keynote 6. And I wanted to ask you about Keynote 6. Is it ready for prime time? Because of anybody that's watched the show knows we've talked about it before here. Keynote was rewritten from the ground up. They don't have everything back in it yet. But in your opinion, is it still an effective presentation tool, or should we be waiting for them to get it to be ready for prime time?
No, I think what I've done is with mine, I've taken some of my longest, most challenging presentations. These are 120 stack slides, 1.2 gigabytes of material, and simply opened it up in Keynote 6. And apart from a few little font changes and apart from certain transitions being lost, it actually operates quite nicely. So I think it is. If you've got gazillion Keynote 5.3 decks and you're suddenly wanting to use that with Keynote 6, you can't just walk on board ship, to use my example, and just suddenly open it up without having tested it. That would be foolish. So I think what you can do is do things in parallel, create things from scratch in Keynote 6 and get used to it. With your really mission critical stuff, leave it in Keynote 5 until you're ready to make that transition. There are some things that I like to do that Keynote 6 can't yet do, and that's the masking of video. So I have a number of movies where professionally made clips, if you like, which I use. But in Keynote 6, you now see the black backdrop, so it has an anti-aliased, if you know what I mean. And so what I've had to do, because I really want that effect in Keynote 6, I've had to go back to Keynote 5, export that particular effect as a movie, and then bring it into Keynote 6. The audience has no idea that I've done this. You just have to make sure that it's just one transition at a time, because you don't have any control over it with you can't just click through it. It just will play as a movie. But you can have multiple movies in there and do it that way until the Keynote engineering team reintroduces, because it's a really important part. But somewhere along the way, they put it down low in their priorities, and other things got more priorities. But for a professional presenter, it's a big glaring gap. But I'm sure we'll get there. But yes, to answer your question, I'll be using Keynote 6 and showing what it can do. It can do some really nice things that Keynote 5 couldn't do, a couple of extra little things in terms of its shadowing, its movement, its motion, a few extra little things that Keynote 5 can't do. But more importantly, its stability. You're doing 125 slides, 1.2 gigabytes. What ended up happening for me, every time I moved an object on a slide, spinning wheel. And I'd sit there for 20 minutes. Well, you can't work like that if you're trying to meet deadlines. It's an incredibly frustrating process, and it kills your creativity. So I was ready for the change. What ended up happening, though, is that because there was 4 years of change, 4 years of waiting for change, because the last version of Keynote, where it was 4 into 5, was in 2009. So here we are waiting 5 years. And so you can imagine the build-up of it's going to be something stupendous. It's going to be unbelievable. And yet we get this version that leaves out stuff. And it appears to be simpler. And people who are professional presenters using Keynote and knowing it gives you such a huge advantage over PowerPoint, we're just so upset. That's why you had this huge, not just, but the whole iWork thing. They were just so upset. And again, it had that flavor of Final Cut 7 into Final Cut 10. How many people just left the platform when someone else, I can't tell you how many people said, I'm going back to PowerPoint. I said, well, you're welcome. Don't mind the door when it hits you when you're on your way out, because you're going back into hell. Why would you do that to yourself? So it's a matter, as we know with Apple, it marches to its own beat, and you just have to be very patient. But yes, Keynote 6 is ready. Just take your time, and don't expect you can just dump Keynote 5 into Keynote 6 and you're going to get the same thing. It's not. You have to be very wary of what's been left out.
I've got to be real careful, because I would love to go down that road of I'm not happy with the current version, so I'm just going to change platforms. I've never understood that. I don't understand that with Windows to Mac, Mac to Windows. Keynote,
Yes.
iWork pages, none of it. It's like, okay, it's not like they took it from you. So give them time, and if you have faith in the company, and I realize that sounds like an Apple fanboy, but they have a pretty good record of success. Maybe, they've done a couple things a little too quick, or maybe they had reasons, but they still, at the end of the day, they still get there and give you what you want, and it's a better product.
Sure. Well, they understand where things are going. The sales of desktop machines are decreasing significantly. The sales of laptop machines are starting to decrease as well. And Apple always gets to that sort of point very early. So what's increasing? Tablets, of course. And what I'm going to say to you that sooner or later you'll have more presentations done via tablets than you will via laptops over Wi-Fi. So one thing I'll show people is how to do that. Bring along my Apple TV and show how you hook it in. How you can move around the room using your iPad. Not so much the iPhone. I'm not happy with the iPhone as your main Keynote tool. But it's a nice backup in case your iPad falls over. But also how to use that iPad to annotate your slides. One of the biggest criticisms of Keynote is what happens if someone asks about something on the slide. How do you sort of circle it or put an arrow to it on the fly? That's kind of a useful thing to be able to do. One of the things I teach is know ahead of time when you're likely to do that and do your own call-outs. Highlight certain things on the side ahead of time, knowing what the audience is going to be interested in, shape up their interest. But sometimes someone will ask something about, you've got a spreadsheet up there. What about that cell over there? And you want to be able to either know how to zoom into that cell or at least put a circle around it. So I've got software that I use on my iPad which will allow you to annotate your slides, to draw on, and people go, how did you do that? And I'm walking around the room doing this. So these are some of the things I want to show to take Keynote to the next level, is a lot of the ancillary or third-party apps that make up for the Keynote's deficits, but add value there. But then go and disappear. They're sort of catalytic applications. They get in, they do their thing, then they get out again. So this is how to change photographs, all sorts of things. But this one in particular is really interesting, how to annotate and of course change your slides, but how to annotate slides and draw on them and draw boxes and all sorts of things. Really useful stuff, because I also use that as my vanity monitor. I don't know how many people use vanity monitors when they do their presentations, but this is the sort of thing to stop you from having to go like this and look at the slide behind you. So I can look down at my iPad, which is being my vanity monitor, but I can also write on it. So we'll be showing how that works as well. So Keynote 6, lots of virtues, lots of values, ready for prime time, but just don't expect to dump all your Keynote 5 stuff in there without testing. My God, got to test it out first. Oh, and the other part is that you're now going to see that young group coming through whose first exposure to presentations will be via Keynote on the iPad. And they're the ones who are now going to go into college. And there will come a time when someone says, okay, everybody, fire up your laptops. I've got a PowerPoint to do. And an 18-year-old kid in first year of college is going to say, what's PowerPoint? The time is coming. No, you don't see that coming?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Kids are going to be first exposed to presentations because they're going to construct it themselves on their iPads using pre-Keynote. And they're going to get to university and some older professor is going to say, here's my PowerPoint. The kid's going to say, what's PowerPoint?
Yep.
I'm so looking forward to that day.
Yeah, you and me both. I can't get here quick enough as far as I'm concerned.
So this explains why Keynote is the way it is at the moment, because of that move towards parity and the acknowledgement of Apple that it has to change its ways because the lack of parity between desktop Keynote and the iPad was so great that I would just prefer to throw Keynote out completely and just say it's finished on desktop. Leave it at 5.3. All of our development is going to happen on the iPad. But here's what's really interesting, because they surprise us by saying, but you can also do it on the cloud using certain browsers. So this is how you get underneath it all. And rather than writing Keynote for Windows, you have Keynote in the cloud. You don't even need to buy Keynote. You can just do it on the web using your Windows-based web browser. Is that sneaky or what? I like that very much.
Yeah, there's no question there are a lot of agendas going on here, and it would be almost impossible to expect it to happen without bumps and bruises along the way.
Yes.
But it's coming, as you said, and the points you've made about the next generation and the couple next generations coming up, I think, are excellent for anyone in academia or business. There's some lessons to be learned here.
Yes, and look, it's a little like, to flip the other way, if you get a CV from a young graduate who's trying to start work with you and it has spelling errors, your feeling about them starts to reduce. You start to wonder about them. You know, am I right about that? I think if you see a CV, it's not just that they didn't properly spell check. It's just that the spell check gave them the wrong words. They gave them the homonyms. They didn't properly check it. You know, they don't understand spelling. I think presentations falls along the same. If you can't do a good presentation and you go into business, and I have two people, I have to choose who's going to go into the fast track. I know which one I choose. The one who's going to best advance my company's agenda by going out there and doing brilliant, engaging presentations. It's become one of the things you have to do. I have to tell you something funny. Here in Australia, we have an overarching health regulation board that manages right across Australia all the health professions, so that you can move from state to state without having to worry about joining up the next registration board. It's a regulation board. Well, on the regulation board for psychology, that included my website for young psychologists to go and learn how to do presentations. That's how serious people take it nowadays. Because they're aware that, you know, to move our profession to the next level, it's not just about what are you doing in the lab. It's what are you doing out there with the population, with influencers, with decision makers. And presentation skills has become one of the things you've got to learn to do properly.
Les, you've been very generous with your time. We really appreciate it. Folks, as you can tell, we've been fighting Skype issues just a little bit, so I hope that Les's message has come through, simply because I think these could be some of the most important presentations at Macworld iWorld, and I really mean that. I think this is a way to distinguish yourself no matter what you're doing and get into the 21st century. Les, update us or tell the folks where they can find the information when you're not at Macworld iWorld, where they can go to follow you and keep up with everything you're doing.
Sure. There's a website that I try and maintain currency of. That's called presentationmagic.com. And in there, you'll see lots of examples of my thinking, plus some of the presentations that I've created for public consumption. And I actually do what's called a director's cut, where I take people step by step, moment by moment, through how I constructed that presentation, why I did what I did, how I selected what I selected, and that's how you learn. And so that's on my website, presentationmagic.com, and oftentimes you'll get as much value from the comments that people make about the thing as what I wrote.
Yeah, and again, go and check it out, please. This stuff is really important, and Les does a great job because he makes you think about it differently than you've ever thought about it before.
Thank you, Chuck. I appreciate
Les,
that.
I'm looking forward to seeing you in San Francisco and to seeing some of the presentations and just in general having a good time with a lot of our friends.
It's going to be a lot of fun this year, I think.
No question. Safe travels. You've got a lot longer way to go than I do.
Only about 18 hours. Give or take a few breaks.
And that says something about the value of Macworld iWorld, right?
Absolutely right. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't come that sort of distance unless I really felt it was worthwhile.
We'll see you in San Francisco.
Thanks, Jeff.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. I've said it at the end of every one. I'm going to be in San Francisco. Les will be in San Francisco. Everybody we've talked about on the road to Macworld will be in San Francisco. We hope to see you there, too. Until the next time, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, app.net, Google+, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date with all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at macvoices.com/newsletter. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com.